Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Today I wanted to do something a little bit different. A friend of mine asked me for feedback on a design she's working on, so I did a little paint over and I figured I could make a video to show you guys my thought process in doing this paint over and what I changed. So the idea behind her design was to make this plant that can walk on tentacle-like roots and burrow into the ground. And so this is on the left her original design. The very first thing that I did was to get rid of the background, because in this case we can check the values and see that the background is kind of hurting. You know, there are values that are getting hard to read. So the very first thing that I did was getting rid of this background. And after I got rid of the background, we could have a better read on the silhouette of the piece. The second step here was for me to enlarge the whole image horizontally a little bit, because it was feeling squashed to me. So that's what I did, just make it a little bit larger horizontally, and so it feels more appealing, more full. Then I went to consider what the idea behind the piece was, so a plant that walks on tentacle. And to me, that is not very clear from the original design. Unless my friend told me, I probably wouldn't have been able to understand that that was the case. And the other problem is that these pieces don't feel connected to each other. We have these kind of like carrot-like roots that are orange in color material. Then we have this bulb here, and then we have the plant. And these three elements don't really feel like they're part of the same organism. So what I did, the first thing that I tried to address in terms of design was changing how the tentacles are integrated. So they kind of start from the base of the flowers and they turn into roots. And then I also decided to make the plant a little bit elevated from the ground, so it feels like maybe it can stand on this tentacle and it can walk on it. And since she told me I want them to feel more like tentacles, not just roots, I tried to create this more flowy shape to communicate that a little bit better. Okay, and after we did this to the plant, the second thing in terms of unifying, so the wrapping around is important, but also I tried to use some of these greens here to make it feel like the plant is transitioning into the roots. So instead of having element of separate material completely, which in certain cases it's completely fine, you don't need to do that. But since we're talking about an organic organism, then I just wanted to add some more color from the greens of the plant into the roots, so it feels like it's transitioning from top to bottom. And since we're talking about color, I just wanted to give an overview of the things that I changed for color, regarding color as well. Because I was feeling that, especially at the top of the plant, we were having these yellows getting a little bit too desaturated and dull. So we have this yellow ochre that gets very desaturated into the shadow, into this desaturated brown orange. And we're getting these, again, very desaturated yellow. And I feel that with this color, it gets a little bit muddy and it feels like the flowers are already dead. And that's not what we want to have in this case. So what I tried to do was to liven up my yellows, make them brighter, and also add some orange or saturated orange into the transition between light and dark, so it feels like, you know, there's some subsurface scattering coming through the petal and lightening up the backside. And to create some more appeal, instead of just desaturating the color, because you can see at the top we don't shift our hue too much around, like we're still very close if you take a look at the color wheel. So what I tried to do is shift the shadows more toward purple to try and complement the yellows. And this way we're transitioning from these very bright and slightly saturated orange to these desaturated magentas. And this creates a very appealing result by comparison, by contrast. And this is also something that we can use to communicate the kind of environment that's surrounding the plant. And I did the same with the greenery, because in the original one, you can see we have these very all warm greens sitting close to each other, and then it gets slightly cooler in the rim here, which is very strong but also desaturated, but still in the same family of hue. Like we don't change hue all that much in the original piece. What I tried to do was grabbing these yellowish greens and then move them toward cool. So this way you can see there is a pretty big passage on the color wheel from warm to cool. And this goes together with the choice of adding purple in the shadows of the flowers, because we're going to communicate that the environment surrounding this plant is cool. And the same thing can be recalled into the shadows. Like we can grab a slightly purplish light color and add, shadows here. And this again reinforces the environment light in our piece. In terms of color, there's nothing else that was really changed beside these points that I talked about. But the next thing that I want to bring focus is on proportion and on shape design. Because beside making the whole plant wider, I also feel like there's a strange balance of proportion between top and bottom of the piece. So for me, I wanted to emphasize the flowers, and also I added this flower in the front because I thought it was a little bit strange that in our focal point, we're looking at the flower from the only direction where there's nothing in the front, right? Because we have a flower on the left, on the right, and on the back. So I would say we could have turned this thing, spin it around 180 degrees so we can see the flower on the front. But in this case, I simply added one more, so we have flowers on all the direction. And I think this makes sense because this is the focal point. We want to look here and it needs to be full. And it was a little bit strange for me to have nothing here. So you can see that I also made these a little bit larger in proportion because that's what I want us to focus on, compared to the base, that it's a little bit smaller and less important. And in terms of shape design, it's a little bit trickier because I feel that there's not a recipe to get good shape design. It's something that you can get through time, through practice, and studying shapes that old masters came up with. But there are certain things that you can watch out for. And one important thing is not to just focus, on the shape of the flowers, for example, in this case, but you have to think of shape of light and dark, and also positive and negative space. So shapes of light and dark, you can see, let's take a look at the values again. You can see here, for example, at the bottom of the central flower, what I did was thinking about this shape of shadow, right, against the shape of light created by the flowers. And this creates a very nice contrast that helps us read the piece. It has a very clear read and contrast and brings the focus right where we want to look. And the second thing is positive and negative space. So positive space, sure, we have this shape of the petal, for example, at the top, but we also have to consider this space. Okay, so if this negative space that gets created between parts of our illustration is also pleasing to the eye, that's added to our whole appeal of the illustration. The silhouette is gonna look very, very pleasing. So don't just look at the shapes of things that are actually on your canvas, but also think how these shapes interact with the nothingness, with the empty canvas, to create beautiful shapes. And you can see there are some good shapes in the original design as well. I'm not saying, these are bad shapes or anything like that. It's simply that we can curate all these smaller things in closer detail to get a more appealing result. So I hope this analysis was useful for you guys, and I'm thinking of making a new series of videos where you can email me your pieces, and I would do something like this where I do a paint over. Maybe next time I can also record the paint over and talk over it instead of just explaining it afterward. So I'll add an email where you can email me pieces and get feedback on. I can't promise I will go through all of them because there might be 2, there might be 10, there might be 100, I don't know. But I want to give everyone the chance, if possible, to do that. So email those pieces, and until then, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.